All right, so maybe we should get started. Reward all those of you who got here on time. Well, first of all, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I can't tell you how excited I am. DevCon is so big. This is our Super Bowl, right? I love coming here every year and talking. This session is pretty special for me. It's kind of a little bit of a weird one, but I'm really excited. It's something I'm really passionate about. So today's session, Design for Non-Designers. Now, before we get started, I do kind of want to acknowledge I've seen some really amazing sessions this week around design. If you miss any one of these sessions, I highly recommend that you go watch the recording as soon as they become available. They're just really amazing, and a lot of these will dive in a little bit deeper into some of the things that I will be talking today. So go have a look at them. Before I get started, I kind of want to tell you a little story about how I got stuck with this with this session. Every year I come to DevCon. I go to every single or as many design sessions as I possibly can. And at the end of DevCon, I always talk with those who organize DevCon to give them my feedback on what I saw. And I remember last year, I think I was talking with Rosemary Tg. Everybody knows Rosemary. She has an integral part in organizing DevCon. And I remember telling her, I was like, look, there's some really great sessions here on design. But I said, you know what would be amazing if we had a session on design for non-designers. She says, oh my God, that's great. You should do it. I walked right into that one, didn't I? But right before I started, questioning her sanity right there, I thought, well, maybe she's right. Maybe if we got somebody who's not a designer, who has the same struggles as the audience, maybe he or she can present those things and those different challenges and how he or she has overcome them or tried to along the path. So that's kind of what we wanted to do here today. Does that make sense? Excellent. So I'm supposed to tell you a little bit of who I am. I've been a developer for a very long time, a lot longer than you might think. I am older than you might think. FileMaker, certified developer. Currently at Claris, I'm a platform evangelist and consulting engineer. That's just another way of them saying you wear many hats. And one of the hats that I wear is as part of the app review team. That means that I get the honor of viewing over probably 200 different apps from the community, and reviewing them, and it's just really amazing. It gives me a chance to see all the great work that you do. I also see some of the challenges that you have when it comes to design, and I empathize with a lot of those because I identify with a lot of those things because I myself struggle with a lot of those things. A little bit more on the personal side, I am a father and husband. I love coffee. I'm a roller coaster enthusiast. But overall, I am a huge geek. I'm a lot of things, but one thing I am definitely not is a designer. And guess what? I'm okay with that, because at the same time, I am also not a professional chef, but I can cook. I'm not a bartender. I can make a mean drink. I'm not a carpenter, but I can still build. And the point is here that you don't have to be a professional designer to deliver well-designed, good-looking apps that have great experience, that give great experience to your users. My journey started over 20 years ago. I remember my first development job, and one of my first apps that I was building. I remember one morning I was really, really excited about some new feature I had built. I can't remember, some sort of script with a button. It doesn't really matter. But I was really excited, and I couldn't wait for my boss to see it. Finally, he comes in, and he looks over my shoulder and looks at the screen. And before I can start explaining how amazing this script or whatever it was, he stopped me and says, "That looks horrible." and I was like, "Yeah, but no. Fix it," and walks out the door. I was like, okay, well, I thought back then good design was about, what, fonts, right? Colors and icons. So what did? I splashed that thing with as many colors and fonts and icons as I can find. A few minutes back, he comes back in, he looks at it, and he says, "That's even worse, what are you doing?" And so I said, well, I don't know what it is. He sits down. 10 minutes later, it's not an award-winning app, but it looks a lot better. And I turned over to him and said, I don't know, what do I do? And his first advice, and this is kind of what got me started, he said, look, if you want to start building better-looking apps, you got to start looking at good-looking apps. So my first advice, and this is kind of how I started, is go out there and look at good stuff. Right? Take out your phone, go on your computer. All those apps that make you feel good, that you feel are really good design, start looking at it very critically. What makes you feel like they are very well-designed apps? So today what I want to do is I want to take you, show you some of the things that I have learned, because I remember that day, one of the things that I learned the most was, looking back, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And it took me a very long time to figure out those things, and maybe today I can save you some time by telling you some of the things that I wish I would have known those 20 years ago. Fair enough? All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. I'm going to tell you a little bit why I think design is important. I think all of you believe design is important, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But we'll talk about design principles. You can't talk about design without talking about design principles, unfortunately. I'll share with you what my design process is. It's not the design process, it's a design process. And then we'll go through a quick example of applying all these things to a real world layout. Fair? All right, so why is design important? Well, design I think is very important, because if we all got challenged with the question of, what does a well-designed app look like, a lot of us will turn up with terms that we can probably put into 3 different categories. And the first thing would be, the app's got to work. It's got to do what it's supposed to do, right? It's got to bring value. It's got to help the user accomplish whatever task it's meant to do. So this is kind of like in the functionality. And I think most of us feel fairly comfortable, right? We can write scripts. We can do calculations. I think in ERDs. I'm talking with a customer. I'm looking at tables and ERDs in my mind. So I think most of us are pretty good with that. And there's been a lot of sessions that will help you out with that. The other things that we'd probably say that it's got to be user-friendly, right? It's got to be easy to use. It's got to be, self-explanatory, and I don't know. The user doesn't have to think, and all these wonderful things. And this kind of falls within the usability department. There's a lot more into UX design than that, but most of the stuff would probably fall into that. The other stuff we would probably say is it's got to look good. They're talking about visual appeal, kind of the aesthetics of it. It's got to look really, really nice. So we'd probably agree that most of the things that we would say would fall into these 3 categories. Now, like I said, most of us are probably really good in the works well department. So today we're going to focus on these 2 things. We're going to focus on usability and aesthetics, so making things look good. So again, we can't talk about design without talking about design principles. And there are hundreds. I've got a book at home that lists over 260 design principles. Designers love to write their stuff down. But I'll get you in a little secret. You don't need them all. I'll tell you the ones that I actually focus on. So in the user-friendly department, conventions. Conventions is about using things that your users already know. All of us carry all this experience, all this knowledge, and all of our users bring that to the table when they sit in front of the computer or on the mobile device. It doesn't matter what language the sign is. We all know what it means. We all know what it does. So we bring all that experience. Your users do too. The idea is to leverage that. Put things in front of them that they actually know, that they understand, that leverages the experience that they already have. The other thing is about visual hierarchies, and Matt Odell had this great session yesterday, and he went a little bit more and had some really great examples about visual hierarchies. But the idea of visual hierarchies is to build your user interface so that it is easily recognizable what is important and what belongs to what, right? So kind of like in the tree, what belongs to what and what is important, and make sure that that is visually recognizable right away. The other thing is to create clearly defined areas. So your UI is going to be always, should be broken up into areas and make it easy for people to find exactly what they're looking for, right? The other thing is making action items obvious as possible. Don't let people think about things. We're talking about, what is clickable, what is tappable, what can be dragged and slide and all those fun things. Make sure that people don't have to think and know exactly where they have to go in order to create an action. The other thing you want to reduce the amount of visual noise. And this is about calling attention to the right things. There shouldn't be too many things calling attention to the user, and we should be able to use, there are several tools that we can use to call attention to really what's important to help the user accomplish the task that they have. And then the other thing is, studies again and again have shown that we as humans don't read. We scan. If you go online, if you go to this websites and apps and everything, we don't read, we scan. We are hunters of information. We try to find a sense of information, and then once we find it, we narrow in there and we try to get more detail. So we can leverage this and use that in our designs to help people do that. So now, what about the looks good department? Well, in the aesthetics department, I only focus on 4 things. First one is proximity. Proximity is about putting things together that have some relationship together. As humans, we see things that are together. We believe that they have some sort of relationship. So it happens not just in apps, but in real life. If we see two people walking down the street, if they are walking next to each other, we immediately assume that they have some sort of relationship. So it happens also in the digital environment. So we should leverage that. The other thing is alignment. Alignment is about connecting objects to one another and to other things on the screen through some sort of invisible line, right, that connects them. It helps with two things. It helps with giving a sense of organization, but also the things that belong to one another. And then repetition. Repetition is huge. I am a huge proponent of repetition because it so happens that we love patterns. As humans, we love patterns. We like things that repeat themselves. But we also like things that are consistent. And we like things that, we like conventions, we like things that get repeated. So it's about repeating objects, repeating elements, not just on your one screen, but also throughout the entire app. So being consistent. Repetition is about consistency. And then contrast. It so happens that we believe, as humans, we like things that are either identical or that are very, very different. And that's where contrast is. Contrast brings interest. We find things that are very interesting. We find things that have contrast, high contrast, very interesting. So you can apply all those things and help your design just in the beauty department just by applying these 4 things. So let's have a quick example. So let's say I've got a layout that we just threw some stuff out there, just some objects very, very quickly. And I start, right, because it's really hard for me to understand what that is, but then I add some proximity to it. I start grouping things that are related to one another and put them and kind of pile them together. Now, as a user, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, yeah, I don't know exactly what this is. It's probably about some inventory, but I see there's some things in the middle that probably relate to one another, some stuff at the bottom. All right, I can see there's something going on there. Then I add some alignment. Alignment starts putting things in invisible lines. You can see there's you can almost see an invisible line at the hard left over there and also at the right. I add some a little bit more alignment. Have that name field all the way aligned to the right, right? So things are starting to look organized and a little bit more appealing. Then we add some repetition. We make things that are consistent. We had a consistency over here, so we make sure the fonts are exactly the same and things like that, and add some elements that repeat. Now we go into contrast, making things that are different really different, make them stand out. So here we use size for the fonts to make them pop so they look very, very different. We'll make the fields really look completely different so we don't confuse them with the text labels, right? Bring some more contrast there. We add a little bit more, maybe we add some contrast over here, and we also make the buttons make sure that they're different, right? We want to make sure the user knows that cancel is completely different from save. So just by applying those 4 things, nothing else, there's no color, there's no crazy fonts, there's no icons, it already starts to look a little bit more appealing. It starts to communicate something to the user. All right, so in the looks good department, we got these. So these are the 10 principles that I kind of go for, right? These are these things over here. By the way, if you look at the ones that look good, the first letter of each one of those makes a very interesting word. Yeah, you can actually look. You can go online and look for crap design principles, and you'll find them. I'm not making this stuff up. So it's pretty cool. Anyways, cool little mnemonic there for you. All right, so I'm going to show you a little bit about what my design process. And again, this is stuff that I've learned along the way, struggling and from reading and talking with other designers out there. So my little design process starts with defining purpose. Then I define the flow, or kind of the workflow of everything, how everything goes and how everything works, so I can get a better idea. I build a style guide. A style guide is kind of like your ERD for your design. Then I sketch. I'm a huge believer in sketching, low-cost, iterative sketching. Then I actually go into the product and start building for the first time. And I test a lot. And you got to test on yourself and also on the user. And then I start iterating until I get to the final product that both the user and I agree upon. So the purpose, there's been a lot of sessions and there's a lot of material on how you can define what the purpose is. But here I'm talking about you need to know exactly what the app is supposed to do. And not just the app, but each one of your screens or layouts, you should be clearly defined what that. And there's so many tools out there. Most of us use things like user stories and stuff like that. Whatever tool you want to use, it doesn't matter, as long as both you and the user are completely clear on what the purpose is. Albert talks about, ask, who is the app for you, or who's the app for the user. And there are different ways of doing this, but you should have that clearly defined. Then I like to set up a workflow. I kind kind of define how things are supposed to progress. And I like to do this on the app level. I sometimes do it on a layout level, but on the app level, I want to know what each one of those screens is going to do and how it interacts with the entire flow. How am I going to guide that user along that journey from point A to point B to help them accomplish that task. And this helps a lot because then my design is going to be based on what it is I want them to accomplish and what each individual screen is supposed to do. What is their little contribution to that. And then I go build a style guide. Now again, a style guide is something that it's kind of like, I like to say it's kind of like your ERD for your design. It's your blueprint. It's where you put all of your materials to see how things are going to look. And there's a lot of components in there. These are the things that I normally focus when I build my own style guides. So in the color department, and should kind of start a little bit talking about some of the things that that helped me along the way. First thing, I don't think you should be a color expert, but I think it helps a lot if you know a little bit about color theory. And one of the first things I learned that was really useful was the relationships between colors, or color harmony. And there's different relationships depending on the color wheel. You can go out there and find this information. Really not hard. You can read them in probably an afternoon. But these are some of the most common relationships between let's Why is it important? Well, once you understand how these things are related to one another, and it's really easy for you to find color and apply them to your designs. So let's say, for example, I take this color and apply it to this layout. Now, maybe I wanted to find another color to bring some highlight, to bring some spice here in that. Because if I know about color relationships, I can find, say, the complementary color to this, and I know those two colors are going to look well together. It doesn't matter how I use them or in which order I use them. I know that they're going to look well together. I could do probably better use of the color, but the idea is that they work well together. Maybe let's do another example. Maybe we want a third color, and I could use just another one of those relationships and add a third color in there, and I know they're going to look well together, right? And that's the power of knowing about these relationships. Another really good thing that helped me a lot was to know the difference between cool colors and warm colors. Cool colors are those colors that on the color wheel have blue or green hues. Warm colors are those that have red and yellow. And the reason that these are important is because as humans, cool colors tend to fade into the background for us. We kind of forget that they're there. Warm colors are colors in nature that call our attention, right? They say the danger, right? This is why stop signs are red. This is why fast foods usually use yellow and red because they call our attention, right? This is from nature. We're built that way. And the reason why this is important is when you're building your design, if you use cool colors, even if you were to abuse cool colors like here, for some reason we are a little bit more forgiving about that. As opposed to if you have warm colors, it's really hard. It becomes annoying very, very quickly. We don't know exactly what we should be paying attention as a user. So knowing the difference between these two and really leveraging what happens to users when they see these two types of colors is a really powerful tool. So the other thing is I don't go at it alone. I use tools. There's a ton of tools out there, free ones too, that given a color will help you find those other colors using those color theory, those color harmony things. And some of them will even show you what a layout will look like, some sort of UI with that color palette. And they'll even tell you how the users that have disabilities, that might be colorblind, will be perceiving, will perceive that. By the way, I think that's very important. I think, designing for accessibility is extremely important. So there are tools out there. You leverage those tools, use them. A lot of them are free. And these are great if you already have a color and you kind of want to find other colors, but guess what? I'll give you a secret. Most designers don't fiddle with colors. They don't come up with colors. They use color palettes that other people have created. So there's a bunch of palettes out there, people that spend all their time creating palettes for you, that you can go in there and you know that they're going to work. So you don't even have to know anything. Just know that there are tools out there. There are places where you can get entire palettes and use those, and you'll know that the colors work well with each other. So what I normally do with color is, first of all, I use it only to highlight. The color should not be, it's not meant for aesthetics reasons, it's not meant to dominate, it's meant to highlight and call attention and communicate with the user. I leverage tools. I don't go at it alone. A lot of times I don't even choose the colors, I let other people choose them for me. And I use as few colors as possible, as few as one, maximum usually 3. If you feel, once you're an expert, there are some designers out here, and they can use 4 or 5, they can handle those. More power to you. I'm good with 3. All right, so let's talk with fonts. Let's talk about fonts. Fonts is really interesting because I think we should all know a little bit about fonts. I don't think we need to be font experts by any stretch of the imagination. But let's do a little exercise here. I'm going to show you a screen, and I want you to look at. There's going to be 3 columns, and I want you to think which one of these 3 do you find the most visually interesting. Right? You ready? All right. Left, center, or right? I can't guess which one you like the most or which one you find more visually interesting, but I'm going to take a wild guess and most of you did not choose the one on the left. And the reason is, like I said earlier, as humans, we like things that are exactly the same, very familiar, or very, very different. We don't like things that are similar. We don't find them visually appealing. And the one on the left is using 2 different font families, but they happen to be fairly similar. And for whatever reason, it kind of, this conflict that happens in us unconsciously, we see that and we're like, nah, I don't know, that doesn't look that well. The one in the middle is using only 1 font family, right? Just different sizes. Again, we find that a little bit more harmonious. And the one on the right is using 2 different font families, but they're very different, right? And this is where kind of knowing a little bit about the fonts and the types comes into play. So my little advice is I stick to 1 font family, and I use size, color, and weight to apply contrast to those. If I have to use a second font, I make sure that they are very, very different so I can add contrast to that. Make sense? All right, let's go to icons. I am a huge icon hoarder. Huge. My icon collection is measured in the thousands. I am that guy. I love icons, and I think most of us as developers, we've grown up, been educated to thinking that icons make user interfaces easier. It's actually kind of a myth. It's not always true. It's really true when icons can communicate immediately with the user exactly what the intent is, and that only comes with convention, with experience, right? And there are very few icons that are universally recognizable. There are not that many, believe me. And I know many of you have downloaded a library and think you're going to apply all of those, and then there's always one icon that's not there, right? There's one, and you're like, oh my God, I can't find it. And I'm guilty of trying to get another icon set that looks very similar and try to get that one to fit in there. By the way, don't do that. But again, it's really about using icons that everybody recognizes, and it's really hard. Let me give you an example. If I showed you this icon, what would you think is the function behind it? You'd probably say it's an eye, so it probably is to view, right? Sure. But if I showed you this icon, well, that's a monitor, it's a display, that's to display? So what if I showed you this, right? So as a user now, I have 2 conflicting ideas that are very similar. I don't know what these buttons are going to do exactly. I think one is going to show me something. I don't know what the other one is going to do. It's really hard to use icons in a way that immediately communicates the idea. So, and by the way, if you want to have some fun, search online for the hamburger menu icon. You can spend an entire afternoon reading. There's a huge controversy. Designers cannot make up their mind on whether it's good or bad. So I'll leave you. That's a good exercise. But anyways, going back to icons. So my recommendation is, as I've learned along the years, is I use as few icons as possible. Preferably, if I can, I'll avoid them altogether. If I have to use icons, if I think I can use icons, and again, they do make things prettier. If I want to use icons, I'll make sure to include text either on the right or right below the icon, which is where most people expect it to be. And if I'm going to choose an icon, I use Nielsen Norman's 5-second rule. If I can't think of an icon for a function in 5 seconds, no icon. I'll just use text. Make sense? Because that means probably nobody else will be able to figure it out. All right, UI patterns. UI patterns about the things about those UI objects and those things that people are going to be using to interact. We're talking about what your fields are going to look like with your buttons and charts, card windows, and all those fun things. The thing I like to say about UI patterns is, first, keep them simple. Use UI patterns that are as least complex as possible. Help your user with that. Use conventions. Again, use all the experience that your users have and make sure that they don't have to think to use these things. And get inspiration from others, right? Go see what others are using in those apps. Like I said earlier, go look at apps that look good, that you feel good, and see what they're using. Spacing, and this is where my OCD goes crazy. So spacing is about a couple of things. One, it's about the size of the object and also the space in between them. And yeah, this is where I go a little bit nuts because I am that kind of guy who can look at a screen, look at the object, and say, yep, there's something wrong with that one, and go into layout mode and nudge it 1 pixel to the left. And because we're saying earlier, we want to make sure we are consistent. And in order to become consistent, we have to make sure that all the sizes and spacings are exactly the same. If you use 20 points in one place, you got to use 20 points every single layout. So in order to do that, right, we all know if we want to be consistent, we have to what? We have to document. So you have to document every single one of these things. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing that. Whatever way, whatever thing rocks your boat is fine. You can write an entire document. That's perfectly fine. If you want to write a document that has all the sizes for everything, go do that. I'm pretty lazy. So what I do is I actually create a template layout. I create a layout where I position everything I create a layout that's kind of production ready. So I put all my UI patterns, all my UI elements, exactly how they might look in a real layout. So I put everything, I put the navigation and the search and all those buttons exactly where I think, and the size exactly where I would want them to be, right? And then I measure the living daylights out of it. I use guides, I use grids, I use everything, and I measure everything, and I nudge things up and down and make sure that they are very consistent and they look really nice. And what happens is, now I've got a template. Now I can take this, and it serves to two purposes. One, if I wanted to create a real layout, all I have to do is duplicate it and then change the things a little bit. I add, I attach scripts to those buttons, I attach table currents to the layout, and do all those fun things, and I've got a working layout very, very quickly. It's really, and it also helps me, it becomes a guide. So if I've forgotten how much space there's between something or what the size I use, I can go back to that layout and look at it, and I know exactly what that was. So it's a kind of a self-documenting method of doing that. So that's with spacing and stuff. So my style guide, once you're done kind of building all those things, hopefully you'll end up with something like this, right? You've got a collection of all your objects, and you've documented your space. You've got all this wonderful information in one place. And that's great, and we build all our style guides, and that's really wonderful. Now here's a little secret. Like I said, I'm really lazy. You don't have to go at it alone. You don't have to do it. You don't even have to do it. You don't have to start from scratch. It turns out that there are a bunch of people, a bunch of designers, and I know you're out there, that have spent hours upon hours creating all these things for you, and all you have to do is go online and find them. If you do a quick search for UI kit, you will be bombarded with sites and places that sell UI kits. And these are collection of objects, and they have everything, including the color palettes and spacing and all things, and even samples of what those elements would look like together. And they come in different formats. Very inexpensive, sometimes even free. Yes, the F word. Believe it or not. So I don't go at it alone either. I'll build my own, but there's just so many out there. And even in the FileMaker community, there's a bunch of stuff that we can use already natively. So if you weren't in Chisao's and Esther Kim's session yesterday, Esther showed a really nice file that she's going to share with the community, built in FileMaker, inspired by by Apple's design guidelines, and it looks gorgeous. So we'll have all these elements that you can just copy and paste and use them directly in your own apps. Richard Carlton has a couple of really nice files out there. This one is actually free. You can go download it. He's got another one where you can purchase. But you can download this one and take those objects and start copying and pasting. You got a complete palette. You got all these objects in there for you. Matt Petrowski's got a really nice site, FileMakerThemes.com, and he's got a collection of themes that he sells. And you download, once you purchase them, you can download a file, and it includes the theme, but it also includes an entire style guide with all the objects applied to them. And even some layouts where you can see how the themes would look like in that. And even in our own Clarence, if you go to download our templates files, we've got 3 nice templates. There's an entire theme built into that. There's some really nice objects. It looks really, really nice. You can take those, and you can duplicate. It's completely unlocked. You can take those objects, copy and paste them into your own solutions. So we got resources, right? We don't have to go at it alone. All right, so we got a style guide. So for the style guide, here's the things that I've learned. I can't stress this enough. Right? Get inspiration from others. Steal. Take it. And what I mean by steal, by the way, is don't just copy it and just don't rip it off. Just make it your own. take that stuff, start tweaking with it, make changes, and really apply it to your own design styles. And again, building template layouts just really saves you a lot of time. So that's what I do. All right. So then we go into sketching, and I'm a huge proponent of sketching, and I know a lot of designers are too. This is a sketch from Ibrahim Bitar from Mexico. He's a huge proponent of sketching as well. I sit down and sketch as much as possible. And personally, I like to use a Sharpie. And the reason is, this is a trick I learned from Don Levan years ago. And the reason is I like a Sharpie is because it forces you not to go into details. So when you're sketching, I don't want to go into details, right? That's for later. I want kind of really nice high level. And it forces you not to go into detail. This is a great way of getting things done very quickly. And I like to iterate. I sketch, I try something out. It's really great because you can iterate. You can kind of step outside of your comfort zone, step out of the box, and guess what? It is really cheap. Really, really cheap. But you don't have to use paper and Sharpie. You can use whatever medium you want. There are great applications out there that you can use to do that. Whatever method you want to do, make sure that it's low fidelity, right? You're not going into detail, and allow yourself to iterate. Do over and over again. Let your design juices go crazy with that. All right, once I've got sketching done, then this is when I first start going into building something in the product. This is where I really open FileMaker Pro Advanced and start building. And if you haven't, I can't go into details of all of these, but these are all tools. If you're not familiar with these, I highly recommend that right after this, you go and look at these tools. These are all tools that are built into the platform to help you make designs consistent and do them fast. So look at styles, look at applying themes, look at stencils, the guides, and also how to use the grids. Very important because all of these things help you make these designs a lot faster and also very, very consistent. Then I go into testing phase, and testing is extremely important. Not only do I test it on myself, I test it on myself, but you have to test it on the user. And I try to answer 3 questions. And every single layout, every single display I'm trying to create, first thing is, where am I? Can I answer that? And this goes into navigation. I need to know, can this layout answer the questions, where am I and where can I go, right? I need to be able to answer that. The display should also, the screen should be able to also answer the question is, why am I here? What is the purpose of this screen? What am I supposed to be able to do? And also, what else am I supposed to do? What are my options around here? What else can I do here? So once I'm comfortable being able to answer those 3 questions, looking at it, then I go into the users and try to them and see if they can answer those questions as well. And then we go into, and then we kind of iterate. But some of the things that I want to stress out with testing that I've learned over the years is first, it's about the user, it's not about you, or it's not about me. And this is really hard, right? It's hard to hear that kind of criticisms and things like that. You have somebody calling your baby ugly, and it's really hard. You got to make sure that the user can answer those questions. It doesn't matter if you can, if they can't, it really doesn't matter at all. You got to leave your ego at the door. Again, I know it hurts a little bit when they say this doesn't work or this doesn't look nice. So don't get attached to anything. If they tell you that something doesn't work, be ready to scratch the whole thing and start from the beginning. And sometimes it's hard. I know we get attached to these things, and it gets a little personal, but we have to be able to detach ourselves from it and not take it personal. All right, so this is my design process, right? Define a purpose, make sure I set up a nice flow for it, create a style guide, sketch, low fidelity, iterate, build it finally in the product, and test a lot, and go back and forth until we feel very, very comfortable with it. There we go. So we're going to go into a quick example of applying all of these things. And if you weren't there, Mark Baum had this really nice session from color to clarity where he reached out to 3 designers and me to show some of the layouts that he had been working on with customers and kind of give us an opportunity to redesign those layouts and maybe contrast it with some of the things that he did for those layouts himself. He didn't, because of time, we weren't able to include my design, or I don't know, maybe because I'm not a designer. I don't know. No worries. But anyways, this is the layout he gave me. Yeah. That's actually been used by a customer. And here's the thing: there's no such thing as I don't think there's a such thing as a bad design. Everybody does stuff with what they have at hand, and users have been able to use this for quite some time, so that's perfectly fine. Are there probably better approaches? Sure. Are there things that might be easier for the user? Absolutely. But I wouldn't call this a bad design. It actually worked, and the users were up and running. So some of the things I kind of want to point out here is this is for a university. This is to help manage chart strings. We don't have to go into detail, but chart strings are just a way for compiling financial information and organizing them. So this layout is used for a couple of things. But it displays here everything you see in pink is actually supposed to be a button, believe it or not. Those fields in colors and yellow and green in there are supposed to be things that you can edit. But then there are other fields there that you can edit, but they don't have color. I think this is because those are a little bit more important. I don't know. There's one, you're going to see one layout all on the top right, which is kind of a summary of all the charges. But all the other portals, they have the charges by categories. So things about like moving and driving and all those things, those are the different charges in there. And they use this stuff a lot. So Mark, to help me out, kind of figure out the purpose, provided me with as much information as he possibly could. I couldn't talk with the customer, right? But he gave me ERDs, he gave me user stories and transcripts of interviews that he had with the customer, so I can kind of derive what the purpose was. I didn't have a lot of time, but I read all the documents, and this is kind of like the purpose of what I thought it was, right? From reading those things and kind of use my intuition. I think the most important purpose of that layout was to validate the chart string. And they've got this process where there's a button there, I don't know if you caught it, that it's to validate all the active chart strings. So every month or so, they click on a button, and it goes through all of the active chart strings, and it runs this process and uses some sort of API. For me, most of the time, they're going to be using that. The other things they do is they need to be able to answer questions from other departments that call in asking, what are we spending money on? So they need to be able to answer those questions. And one of the things that the user brought up was, we want to make sure that we don't accidentally make changes there, because any changes in the data there has really serious ramifications. So with that in mind, I had some purpose. I really didn't need a flow because there was only one layout, but normally I would set up a flow in there, right? All right, so style guide. I didn't have a lot of time, and again, like I said, I don't go at it alone, so I went online and I bought one. I bought this UI kit, which had all the stuff that I really needed. It looks gorgeous. It helped me out with everything I needed, and I can just either copy and paste or replicate those UI elements as I need it. So once I had that out of the way, yay! It only took me like 5 minutes for that. I went into sketching. So here's what I do in sketching. I sit down and I make sure that I have very, very clear purpose for this screen. I sit down and I actually time myself. I give myself probably a minute, and I sketch as many iterations of that screen as I possibly can. So all of these 6 different versions were done in a minute. You can do them really fast. You'd be surprised at how fast you can do these things. So I just sketch them really out, and I'm thinking in my head, which UI patterns would help the user, if I were the user, kind of accomplish that task, right? What would the story be? What would I need in order to accomplish that really important task? So I'm sketching really quickly, and I'm thinking in that first one, I think maybe there's some details there, and I think those circles up there would be some sort of chart or charts or something like that, some sort of dashboard type things where I can hide some piece of information. On the second one, I'm kind of going for more like a master detail kind of thing. And again, those squares might be some summary information of all those portals, which they said they don't use all the time, but they do need. So I'm just sketching out all these things. At the end of the minute, I got all these six of these. The 4 and 5, I didn't like right away. I was like, yeah, no, I don't need this one. The 6th one was like, eh. So anyways, I choose the first 3 and I say, you know what? I'm going to work on these. So when I go back and I iterate on those. Start with number 1 and just make different changes. And I let myself, just move things around, add other UI patterns and things. This is where I can really kind of let go. And you probably notice the one on the bottom left, I tried to go into detail. But the Sharpie helped me back, right? You can see I was trying, but because of the medium, I can't go in there, and it's really wonderful. This is the kind of version number 3. I kind of go into some really crazy things out there and try to figure out some some nice flow for it. This is number 2, and you see I made some changes there. I think in the first one I thought, well, there's nothing there that tells the user where they are or what they're doing. So I kind of moved that and moved it outside. So that big squiggly part, it should be like some sort of thing that tells you, some sort of label that tells you where you are and what you're doing. So I kind of ended up with that one. I think with version 2 of that one. And I'll show you really quickly how I iterate. So one of the things I do is I go into FileMaker and I start building the layout, and I duplicate the layouts. I duplicate it, and I start making changes, and I allow myself to make errors. It's okay. I like to make some crazy things. It doesn't matter, because I've got another layout I can go back to at any given time. So I could do some really crazy stuff, right? Stuff that I immediately said, like, no, that's not going to work. That's really crazy. I go over here. And by the way, that portal on the right, that's not a real portal. I copied and pasted a list from that UI kit just to see what it would look like, right? I didn't have to go into really working and creating a portal. Just put that in there and see if it really works, see what I had in my sketch kind of worked. And I kind of liked it, so I went in and actually built the portal. And I started making changes here and there and applying all those things, applying some colors, applying some contrast and things like that, and making the changes as I go along. Again, every time I'm duplicating the layout, allowing myself to make mistakes, go back, and whichever one I kind of like, I keep. I don't keep everything. So this is what I ended up doing. This is what I ended up with. So I'll walk you really quickly at kind of why I did some of these decisions. So the first thing is here on the top left, this is what I think the user is going to be doing most of the time. And yes, I broke my first rule, which is about just using a few colors. I'm using 2 colors. And the reason why I chose to have this in a completely different color is because this brings attention to the user. Right? I think they're going to be doing this the most amount of time. It's on the top left. Your eye immediately goes there and is in a different color. It calls their attention. I think most of the time they probably won't even go beyond this point. And you'll notice that everything else that is actionable is blue. I chose that color or a type of blue. Everything else that you can click somewhere is actually blue. Here I give them a nice, it's a master detail. This is a list of all the chart strings, and I have to give them a little button there that shows active only, because they do have an action button over there that says that validate the found set, so maybe it'll be nice for them to find the found set very quickly, and things like that. Then in the center here, I've got all the details that are pertinent to that particular chart string. So on the top, immediately, that's the code. That is the most important thing for them. Some actions right below them. And then all these other pieces of information that they said they want to change every once in a while, but they don't change very often, and they want to make sure that they don't do it accidentally. So in order to do that, they have to click on the edit button that's besides it, and that would bring up a card window to let them do that. Now, there's only one out of all the portals that were there's only one that they said that they actually use all the time, and it was this one that has kind of a summary of all of the kind of the ongoing record of all those charges. So I left that one there just because they said that. All the other ones are hidden. So these little buttons over here will tell you a number that tells you how many charges are within that category. In other words, these are how many portal rows are inside each one of those portals. The idea is that you call up and say, do I have any rentals in this chart string? It's like, yes, you've got 2. Which one are there? If you really need that information, I can click on that button and it'll give a card window and give me that detail. I can hide those things that they don't need all the time, right? Removing some of that visual noise. So I went from this to this. It took me about 2 hours. Thanks. It really took me about 2 hours. I'm going to say 2.5 hours to do that from start to finish. Again, I leverage a lot of the tools that are out there, so I didn't have to go at it from scratch. All right. If you can only buy, here's where we're going to kind of resource. If you can only buy one book, buy these 2. I'm a huge fan of both of these books. The one on the left, Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, is an amazing book about usability, making things very user-friendly. It is a really, really great book. This guy's been around for quite some time. Then the one on the right is the Non-Designer's Design book by Robin Williams. It is a great book to get started into some of those design principles that I was talking about. It goes a little bit deeper on those, but both of these books are in a level that most of us can understand. They don't go into a lot of crazy things, and I think it's a great starting point for a lot of us. All right. Before I leave you, I do kind of want to leave you with something a little bit more passionate. I want to leave you with a quote. I really like this quote. You don't think your way to creative work, you work your way to creative thinking. And I think that is it's just really important. We need to start realizing that we don't have to be professional designers in order to deliver great looking design that really excels the experience of our users. We can all do this. It takes a little bit of work, it takes a little bit of a little passion, a little bit of work to do, but we can all do this. With that, thank you very much. There will be updates. I'm going to post the slide deck with a lot more resources. I'm also going to include a lot of great tips I heard from a lot of designers that are out there, and it'll be really, really nice. I'll include a lot more resources there, some books and some other things in there. I will be around. If you want to ask any questions, please use the mic over here.
Hey, Ronnie. WebDirect, I heard someone mention in a previous session that he only uses Arial. Any recommendations with regard to font choice and WebDirect in particular? I've noticed sometimes using like condense is not a good idea.
They can only use Arial? I didn't hear that. I must have not been in that meeting. But yeah, I don't know about that. I've never heard of that.
Fonts to avoid?
Any fonts to avoid? So here's the thing. I remember years ago when we were talking about fonts, which fonts to use. I remember we had a lot of discussions, and in the developer groups and community, into finding what was the perfect font that you can use that would work across all the platforms that FileMaker supports. That's very ambitious. and the truth is, if you ask yourself the question, do I really create layouts that work across iOS, Mac, Windows, and the web? Do you? If you do, you're amazing. I want to meet you. Most of us do not, right? We'll create a layout that's probably good for mobile devices, probably maybe for phones, maybe for tablets, maybe one for desktop, maybe one for FileMaker WebDirect. So if we're going to do that, if we're going to create already new layouts, then why not let yourself use fonts that work in those platforms? So my recommendation is use fonts that are appropriate for each platform that are available there. Could the FileMaker platform have better tools for managing fonts? Absolutely. But what we have right now, I think it suffices if we can focus on the fonts that we know work well for each one of those platforms. Cool.
Like other developers, I often create layouts specifically for me, just containing the fields that I use as a developer.
Sure.
I might go to that layout to do a find or a sort, or so I can see all the data in one place.
Yes.
And I often build those, and they're a complete mess because I'm doing them quickly when I'm troubleshooting or something. Do you have any hints and tips about how to build those?
To build those? No, as long as you don't show them to anybody but yourself. No, I think the only advice I would give you, and this is because I've seen a lot still this happen, make sure they're not running in Classic with the Classic theme. The Classic theme has been completely unsupported since version 14. Don't use it. We're not updating it. It can bring you some problems, and it can actually make things slower. So just as long as you don't do that, you can apply some of these things to make that layout easier for you, because you're the user there, right? Whatever makes you feel comfortable. And so it's easier for you to answer those questions. The only thing I would say, just don't do that. There are some performance things that you might want to consider, but other than that, you're the user. You can answer those questions. Let's go ahead.
How do you deal with users who want to see and print everything on one layout all the time?
So the question is, well, what do you do with users who want to see and print everything in one layout? The eternal question. See, this is where we kind of put I always say we put on not our designer's hat, but kind of our consultant's hat. And you have to talk with your user and see really what works. The first thing that a user is going to say is like, hey, I want everything on the layout. And the user's like, okay, that's perfectly fine. We'll put everything. If you really want everything, I will put everything there. But let's start talking about what the screen is about. What is it you're trying to accomplish? What is the task? And start chipping it. Just put on the layout only the things that they need in order to accomplish that task. And ask them, is this enough? no, I need this other thing, and you can add more, and you slowly add things there. You should start with the minimum available objects in order to accomplish the task that they need. A lot of the times, just by talking, just by doing that interaction with the user, you can get to something, to a nice compromise where your design and your developer kind of come together. But at the end of the day, it's the user. They're the one who's paying the check, who's writing the check, and if they want everything, you know what? I'll give them anything. But a lot of times, you can just talk them into something that's a lot more user-friendly than just, mad salad and put everything there. Cool. All right. Well, again, thank you very much. Appreciate it.